If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong.
Yeah, look, they said that I couldn't do it, so I went and did it. W's only, you know I've been winning. Top of the world, the globe is spinning. If you know, I've been on a mission. Go. Okay, let's get it. Got a little time on my hands like a wristwatch. I don't got time for the brakes and the pit stop. Race through the gridlock, take it like Chris Rock. Right to the chin, still win. Heavy metals like Slipknot. Got the driving, I got tunnel vision. I just hit my stride the way I run the business. I've been making paper like I'm Dunder Mifflin. See the end game, I got one division. Look, I don't ever bother with a critic. Hit him with a chronicle of Riddick. Boom, bottle full of Ritalin. I hit him with a little bit of riddle me this, riddle me that. My bad, fell asleep at the gas. No time to wait though. Elon Musk, I'm trying to bankroll. New Tesla just cause I say so. Electric whip like Ivan Van Gogh. I just did it. W's only, you know I've been winning. Top of the world, the globe is spinning. If you know, I've been on a mission. Okay, let's get it.
I've been on a mission like totally spice. I'm Betty, she bad, but she totally nice. Nails are blue and her toes feel like white. They completely match out at the soul for my leg. He knew it for sure, but he left with a why.
What is up, party people? All right. What is up, Zep Teppy? What is up, Real? What's up, Sean Smith? Saw you in there earlier. He says, Zep Teppy says, he timed me out today for telling him to be careful when berating trolls like he does. Oh, he never listens, and, you know, you can get booted for almost anything. Anything is ever possible, you can get banned. You could get banned for saying hi. I ultimately got banned for telling him that oil is not infinite. So, as far as I'm concerned, you can get in trouble for anything. But what is up, party people? Don't have a lot planned. Just the daily. I know that what's his name has been making his rounds, Mr. Slave. I'm sure you guys caught the upload that I brought up with him in tutorial. I thought that was a good example of what happens when someone who has a good understanding of the conversation and is able to keep up with the slogan as I call it, that Mr. Slave ensues, and is able to just break down where he's just BSing completely. So I thought that was pretty cool. That's why I threw that upload up there. For everyone that wasn't here the other day when I was talking about it, I am going to start the membership thing up probably tomorrow. I'll probably click the accept thing where it starts up. But and so everyone knows, the content that will come from that will be uploads, at least 1 to 2 uploads a week, and it will absolutely be just chaos, drama, or something of the sort that I wouldn't normally play on here. This will be probably from places like Debate Flat Earth Server. A lot of content's there. A lot of it's going to be drunk fucking idiots saying shit they probably shouldn't say. Whether it's conversations that happened in many years ago on the back panels of things that were going on, or conversations that a lot of people didn't even know ever happened that I happened to be there for. All right. What up, Riggs? Riggs says oil is infinite. I say no. It's very simple. You couldn't even examples of quote unquote wells replenishing. I think people have a very weird misconception of what an oil well actually how it actually works. The only wells that would ever replenish would be a well that is drilled and bored out for the purpose of extracting from a main well, like a main oil source. Those wells, they fill up, absolutely. But as in oil, like if you found a oil rich pocket, when you drain that shit, unless you're planning on doing a oil extraction project, which is using CO2 to extract the excess out of the walls, you're just wasting your time. But yeah, again, definitely not infinite. One of the days he'll piss off the wrong troll. How can anything physical be infinite? It's just such a ridiculous thing. Yeah. And again, will Earth always produce oil? Yes. Because obviously organic matter is going to decay, and that is one of the processing parts of this. So there will always be, obviously, because what we have now didn't just happen; it happened millions and millions of years ago. So yeah, Earth will always create this oil deposits, but as of what we are able to pull and pull again, when it comes to oil, in oil using oil or using CO2 to extract oil, that process is going to happen just at the end of a project. Yeah, and well, see, that's another misconception. Fracking isn't the same thing. Fracking would be the process of injecting to extract renewables, um, where they're already they're not injecting CO2 into natural crevices and cracks to extract things. They're using it in already oil rich wells that have been pumped. All pools in the earth are from bioproduct of the oceanic life. There is an infinite replenishment of these sources. Yes, I okay. I in that sense of it, Riggs, I would absolutely agree. The problem I see is when people are arguing that like a, a oil rich pocket replenishes itself. That's not true. That part is just not true at all. These pockets are due to the large consumption and compaction of the organic matter that decays. All lives except for cockroaches. I don't think cockroaches have an end life. I don't even think crocodiles and is it crocodiles or alligators? One of the two crocodiles. I don't think they have and lobsters. Yeah, they don't have an end date, but that's only because we've never like seen one live a full natural life and then die, or they haven't found one that's dead of natural causes. Is probably be a better way of saying it. Yeah, exactly. Real. We use it way faster than it can be replenished, and that replenishing part takes extremely long time. So I guess oil is an over unity machine. It doesn't make more than we can use. It doesn't work that way. But yeah, I've had these conversations with people before about this oil aspect of oil is infinite, and Riggs, you may have a different outlook on it. I don't know because it's a couple sentences that we've discussed this, but one of the main things about it is you have to realize that for it to be infinite, for one oil, these oil rich pockets to be drained completely, we'll say completely, right after the CO2 process and everything, to for you thinking that it will replenish, you would have to show me how oil is created without the means of this long process of bio decay and all that good stuff. Oil is created faster than we can ever utilize it. I don't think. Wow. How? Okay. Then how? What process do you understand that creates oil? Because the only process I understand in the natural way, especially in these pockets that we find, does take a long time. Rick says oil is infinite as the air we breathe. The system replenishes faster than consumption. Well, that's another problem because the air we are constantly making it crappier than natural clean air. Uh, if you don't believe me, go out to the middle of the woods in the wilderness when people aren't. Take a deep breath and then go to LA and take a deep breath. I just I don't see a source because our okay. So this is one of the things that triggered me about it because Arwen was saying this, and Riggs, tell me if you agree. He was saying that if us as humans didn't pump oil, that at some point that oil would basically just become like random volcanoes all around Earth because of the it not being alleviated. Because to me that's when you get really woo woo, and you don't, and a lot of people don't really understand how that works. So less than 1% air pollution, and the system can't fix that. No, absolutely not. If we could fix it overnight, wouldn't we? I just don't see. It just doesn't make sense. Because if that were the case, then why would we be drilling? Why wouldn't we just be creating our synthetic oil in a lab and stop drilling altogether? If it was that simple, if it was able to replenish itself faster, I don't know a process that is that fast because we use a lot of oil. That would probably be the biggest question I have. Which system keeps repairing itself? Because I don't see a system in which repairs itself. I see a system as of right now that is getting worse and worse, whether it's natural or due to man. I get that the Earth will be here long after we are, and in that sense replenish itself. But uh, I think the biggest issues is that, and especially in certain spots on Earth, we are able to overdo our stay, if you will. I mean, look at major metropolitan cities and all the wildlife that used to be there before. I think it's at the detriment. I think we can definitely affect it. We do every day. I mean, um, we move rivers, we stop oceans. Shit, at this point, we're fucking starting to affect local climate. I wish it was the aspect. I wish it was that thing, Riggs, where you're saying where we can hardly affect it. I wish that was the case because then it wouldn't be a situation of fixing anything. It wouldn't be a situation of having to repair if Earth did it that fast. And that may be the problem. It may be fast. It's just not fast enough for humans, and we've given this arbitrary number of what we think it should be. Because I'm gonna tell you, I'll keep it real with everyone right now. I think that instead of all these bullshit excuses of band-aids and solutions that drive money for their pockets, we need to start focusing on adapting. changing our way of life, getting ready for what could happen because nature is fucking nature. Because that is one reality of it too. Whether even if we do affect it, even if we don't affect it, Mother Nature is motherfucking nature, and it's going to do whatever it wants. And tomorrow is not a guarantee for what the day will be like. Obviously, right? I mean, places are getting weather and shit change that didn't normally have. But I think that's one of those big issues with that is you end up on one of the ends of spectrum of the climate change conversation. You're either on that spectrum where like it's humans do it all, or you're on that side of the spectrum where it's like climate change isn't real. And I think both sides of that spectrum are the reasons why it's become such a mainstream BS argument about what to do and how we need to fix things. Because again, there is no quick fix. Everything you ever hear about, we need to do this so it fixes this, is bullshit. I'm telling you right now, if you decide to fucking start walking to work every fucking day, your shit ain't going to contribute to helping anything. That's just like a goal of if one person sees you do it, then another person will. Well, fuck you. We're Americans. That's not how it works. What is up, Cynthia? How you doing? Good morning. Or actually, it's good afternoon now. Damn. And I'm sorry I started out late. I was enjoying myself, flying my drone around, doing aimless crap. But yeah, that's one of like I said, I think it's for a lot of people that don't realize it, a lot of people sit on that fucking spectrum where it's like, hey, climate change isn't real and all it is bullshit. And then this other side is literally just man did it all. And I think that is ridiculous because that's based on evidence that's not substantial enough to dictate what Earth does. It's just ridiculous. I don't like it. I think it shows the selfishness of people, because if depending on what end you're at, if you're on that end where it's all humans, then you are the problem, right? Because you don't want to give up your car, you don't want to give up your smoking, you don't want. There's a lot of stuff you're not willing to give up, and that's another reality of it. If we're gonna fix, quote unquote, fix this, are you willing to give up all that luxury you have? Because believe it or not, even the lowest of incomes have luxuries when it comes to this conversation. Rick says the climate does change, but the relevancy to other areas, we are less Yeah, I agree with that. The problem is when the areas that we do affect encroach on the areas that aren't directly affected. I think that's where the problem starts. I think when we look at where we live as a small area, and in reality it's a much bigger area than you realize, I think that's when we start talking about what we actually do. But when it comes to the climate, yes, there are drivers, but I think climate has always changed. Climate has always had a dramatic change when it shifted, and to think that we are the fault of it, you're putting yourself on way too much of a fucking pedestal as far as I'm concerned, and you don't even realize that it's a money grab, and that's even scarier. And all the stuff I've talked about, if anyone looks into like all my geoengineering weather modification shit, I talk about how this shit is a scam, how they manipulate people's views on these things to come up with policies that will benefit them and theirs. I talk about all this stuff. It's a very real situation. Global warming is a situation, but like I said, we need to learn to adapt. We need to function to adapt, not play this "we're gonna fix it" game. We're not fucking God. Let me rephrase that. We're not fucking a god. There you go. That's a better way of saying that. And I try to say a lot, Cynthia. I really do. I try to make my points as clear as possible in as many words as possible. But that's just the reality of it. I really and I see it as on this. The reason I look at it this way is because I did come from a side where doom and gloom drove everything that I thought. And then I went to a side where it was like there has to be a rational way to come up with these things. And then you realize that there is truth in between that. And you got to you got to force yourself to be in the middle to weigh things honestly. But it's to me, it will never be one of those things where it's like turn the blind eye and act like it doesn't. Rick says 30%, 37% of the oil produced comes from the ocean. There is near infinite amount of ocean, and oil reserves are always topped off. We don't use it as fast enough before Earth. If that can't be true, because if we that were the case, then we wouldn't be ever shutting down those platforms. We would never be moving on. We wouldn't need 10,000 of them. We would just need one that could pump as much as it could into a capacity. But even a lot of these places aren't even pumping to capacity because of that reason. And I know they're not, and they can't always be full because then CO2 oil and enrichment wouldn't be a process. That's a process of when the traditional means of pumping oil out of a well no longer work because there's not enough. They no, they talk about tapping wells all the time, tapping them out all the time, Riggs. They use the CO2 process after they've tapped out. A lot of places in Texas do this. A lot of, if you go to like the West Texas mainly, um, a lot of what happens is they drain a well. They get to a point where they're not going to get a sufficient amount to fill barrels every day, and that oil isn't oil that is just magically replenishing. That's the stuff that's not in an abundance in the middle of the well. That's stuff that's in the walls that seep out of the walls, and then you can say replenish, but that oil's been there. It just wasn't. You just couldn't get to it. It's the same process though, Riggs. Those when they drill oil in the oceans, it's so far from the ocean. It's ridiculous. They drill miles deep just to get away from the ocean water to get to that oil. And yeah, a lot. Those pockets are probably a lot bigger, but at the same time, I don't see them as infinite. But I don't see the veins that replenish being like a there's zero oil left and suddenly there's oil again. And in the oceans, it's the same thing. They're not drilling from an infinite pocket. I think the one in the Gulf Coast is insanely large, but there's only so much that can be drilled out of it. It's not. I've never heard them ever say that they're not putting a dent in it, or that they have to drill because if they don't, it will fill the oceans. Because that goes along with what Arun was saying. If they stop drilling rigs, would the oceans fill with would the oceans suddenly fill with oil? Because it's a lot more biomass in the ocean, so I guess the pockets would be bigger. But again, I don't see a situation where they're infinite. I don't ever hear them say we have to drill otherwise. Rick says the ocean has a near infinite organic life reproduction. The oil is yeah okay. Then we are saying something different then because again I fully agree. Earth is constantly organic life is constantly dying on Earth, and that organic life in high abundances and pockets are going to create oil pockets. But do you think that, and this is just for clarification, do you think that an oil well that has been pumped, CO2 enhanced, and then pumped out again, if it was completely dry, zero oil, do you believe that that pocket would then replenish? And the reason I'm asking that question is because um, what you're saying, your last comment in the chat, the oceans has a near infinite amount of organic life for reproduction, and all that. That part I agree with. If that's the sense, then yes, Earth will always produce pockets of oil. I don't know about if that bio waste or that organic life that decay will become oil fast enough to make that assumption, but it will always, it will always make oil. And yeah, if humans go away and never come back, at some point it will be just as much oil as when we started, I think. Okay, I can agree with that. I just don't see evidence that a completely drained zero oil well can replenish itself. For one, I don't even think that's possible because who's to say that enough organic matter dies in that location? What up, AI? Rick says oil seeps and replenishes over time, some more than others, some not at all. Except the oceans, they are always topped off or being created infinitely. I don't know about the topped off, but created infinite, like forever being created, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Okay, what's up, AI? Saw your performance on Fight the Flat Earth. What if he's still going? Pretty sure he's still going. Every time he gets close to the end, they keep gifting membership, so it goes up a lot more. Yeah, exactly. Over time, it will fill up. I can get that. And then the other thing is, I don't even think we have the means to pump all the oil that's there right now. Not to mention this, it's not that simple. And it seemed like he had fun. Speaking of old videos, thinking about playing the SE Montreal Gold Gangsters conversation about stuff. I think they were talking about light, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. I'd have to pull it up. Let me see where it is. Is that it? That is it. Pumping oil is extremely difficult, especially in the oceans and maintaining it. I would agree with that as well, Riggs. I just don't see the evidence that they would, one, refill like that, and two, more than we are able to actually pump. But Riggs, do you think that if we stop pumping, that at some point the oil would burst through the surface? What's up, nerd? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out where your stance is on that part. AI, what's your opinion on oil? Does oil infinite to you? Do drained oil wells, do they fill up mysteriously? And how long does it take, Riggs? When you say, see, I guess you already answered that. I just don't think they can refill faster than we can use them because otherwise that leads to that question I asked you about if we didn't. Did you know they're actually okay? So here's another one of the wonderful CO2 solutions they've come up with. Not sure if you guys have ever heard of it. It's called iron fertilization. It's where you literally dump iron into the ocean. The purpose of this is to get the phytoplankton excited. When they get excited, they breed, they make more, but more importantly, that phytoplankton loves CO2. Oh, it loves it. They absorb it. It's just great to them. So what they do is they ionize the ocean, phytoplankton blooms, and then it absorbs as much CO2 as they can in their lifespan, die, and then they fall to the bottom of the ocean. The bottom of the ocean then becomes trapped with byproduct, like Riggs is saying in the chat, and carbon dioxide pockets, which are deadly. But then there's the downside of that, because that phytoplankton going into that bloom also creates red tides. Um, I can't say with 1,000,000% positivity that this happened, but I would arguably say, and I can show you proof of scientific iron fertilization projects that have happened in the past, primarily in Alaska, and that affected salmon runs. But what I'm talking about is there's a lot of shit that was going on in the Gulf, Gulf Coast, and in the Atlantic on the East Coast, obviously, with a lot of red tides subsequently scheduled around when they were doing ocean fertilization projects off the Cuban, Puerto Rico, and all that good stuff. So, and then look it up. Australia's had this big problem. Heard about the coral reefs that are doing the bleaching. That is suspected by many to be due to this iron fertilization process. Rick says you would have small pools, but most come from being near shorelines and having dry climates allowing for seepage. No, 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 Riggs, I see what you're saying. I understand that there's going to be more organic decay happening in the oceans, but you got to remember the majority of that life doesn't even become oil. It's not like there's just an oil under all of Earth. Like, we would say there's magma. Shit, Sean, you guys got to worry because you guys get such an abundance of fucking hurricanes that they do a lot of research and testing on weather modification in those hurricanes. Pretty much every hurricane, there's going to be at least three different agencies, which would be NOAA, NASA, and I forget the other one, but I think they're contracted. The hurricane hunters. You can look them up. But they're constantly doing research and dropping things into hurricanes, and that's just one more step to being able to do something about that they want to do or try to control things, which they have tried to, and it did not turn out good for shit. And that became a public situation. It got so bad. If you don't know what that is, it's Project Storm Fury. Look it up in 1940s, 50s. Um, there was a hurricane in Florida. They decided to seed that hurricane in the hopes to minimize it, to weaken it, and it actually had adverse effects. And the storm actually went from, I think, a category F3 to like category 3, cat 3 to like a 5, I think it was. Did millions of dollars worth of damage, and because the media got wind of the project, the military actually came out with an apology for seeding that hurricane and the effects that it had, and they actually paid back a lot of damages because of it. Um, yeah, yeah, Sean. Storm Fury was a really bad one. That was a prime example of human influence in a hurricane. There's been a lot of different how you would say clues, evidences for this. Um, it doesn't take much to realize, to learn how hurricanes work. If you really look at the big picture of a hurricane, it takes warm water, right? That's like one of the biggest ingredients for it. We know this because usually when a hurricane is coming towards land, it building hits land, and then we start seeing it dissipate due to lack of warm water, etc. Um, Katrina was a perfect example where this was not the case. We watched a hurricane actually get stronger as it went over land, which is basically unheard of when it comes to the science of how hurricanes are structured and formed and everything like that. Not saying they did anything, but those are the type of things I look out for. I see and go, oh, okay. Yeah, they. Yeah, let me show you guys because it is a pretty big deal. Let me see, storm chasers. All right, let me show you this. Okay, so they did it twice in 62 and in 83. Pull this up so you guys can see it. Uh, an experiment project of research for hurricane modification carried out between 1962 and 1983 proposed that the modification techniques involved in artificial simulation and convex outside of the eye wall. Basically, just explains how they're going to do it. And these are all at least. And here's the thing: these were all under guides to to suppress hurricanes. But again, when you try to play that finger of God shit, sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the time, it doesn't work. It's the scary part. But let me find that other one. All right, just a little bit better for it. Project Storm Fury was an attempt to weaken tropical cyclones by flying aircraft into them and seeding them with silver iodine. Silver iodine is actually still currently used for cloud seeding, so you guys know. The project ran by the United States government in 1962 to 1983. The hypothesis was that the silver iodine would cause supercooled water in the storm to freeze, dispersing into the inner sources of the hurricane and leading to seeding several Atlantic hurricanes. However, it was later shown that the hypothesis was incorrect and was determined that most hurricanes do not contain enough supercooled water for the cloud seeding to be effective. Additionally, researchers found that unseeded hurricanes often undergo the same structural changes that occurred or that were expected from a seeded hurricane. The findings called Stern Fury's success into question, as the changes reported now as a natural. Okay, so let me find the other one. Where am I? Okay. Let's see which one it was. Project Circus. Okay, that was the one. That's the main one I was talking about. Let me see if I can get that one because that was a big one. That was specifically the one I was talking about. Project Storm Fury were the ones that had a lot of questionable things that they had figured out a way not to get in trouble for. Project. There it is. Project Citrus was the first attempt to modify a hurricane. It was calibrated with the General Electric Company's, the United States Army Civil Corps, blah, blah, blah. The projects B2, B-17s, and B-29s on the 53rd Weather Renaissance Group were dispatched from McDale Field, Florida, to intercept with the hurricane. The seeding B-17 flew along the rain bands of the hurricane and dropped nearly 180 pounds of crushed dry ice into the clouds. The crew reported pronounced modifications of the cloud duct seeded. It is not known if it was due to the seeding. Next, the hurricane changed directions and made landfall near Savannah, Georgia. The public blamed the seeding. Irving Langmar claimed the rise had been caused by human intervention. Searches was canceled and the lawsuits were threatened. Only the fact that the systems in 1906 had taken a similar path, as well as evidence showing that the storm had already began to turn when the seeding began, ended the allegations. The disaster set back the course of seeding hurricanes for 11 years. At first, the seeding was officially denied and took years before the government admitted it. According to September 12, 1965 edition of the Fort Lauderdale News and Sun Sentinel, in 1947 a hurricane went wacky, and the 12 years later it was admitted the storm had fact been seeded. That was a big one. But yeah, I don't care. They say 83 is when they stop. They still do that shit, absolutely. Yeah, Sean, that's the one I just read. Pretty sure you probably, yep, yeah. That was a big one. That was the one that went, oh, okay. And then the problem with that is that when they started, that's when they started figuring out little BSs to not be blamed for it. Where was the part that I was reading? Because this is the part right here. This is the thing where they take the blame away from them. Let's see this part right here where they're talking about the path of the hurricane, and then they were like, well, it was at turning when they seeded it. You know, they find ways to go, it's not our fault. This happened with on the lower scale of cloud seeding. Let me show you cloud seeding. There's back in the early 50s, I think it was, when cloud seeding started in, like, you know, the rural farming areas. They ended up finding out that, like, if you were to cloud seed in northern Texas, for example, and quote unquote it starts raining, another thing that does actually happen is the rain that would, you know, the weather patterns that send rain further south actually end up becoming dry patterns, and you end up getting droughts in places. So for decades, there were a lot of lawsuits over cloud seeding, just a small scale cloud seeding. So what they ended up doing is basically going, cloud seeding has this much percent of a chance of working, this percentage amount of time, and we can't guarantee it. But yet, the funny part is it's a billion-dollar industry now. So obviously, it works a lot better than they lead off to. But that push of liability away from them makes it so that if they cloud seeded over a city, that city gets some type of monsoon weather because they overseeded it, and mudslides and flooding and all that kind of shit, they won't be liable for doing it. Because this was actually a case that happened in San Bernardino, California. I'm not sure if you guys remember it. About a decade ago, they had a lot of big rains and big time mudslides. Big mudslides. Come to find out that the prior 3 months prior to that storm, they had been doing extensive cloud seeding projects. And those cloud seeding projects, in my opinion, brought a lot of rain, loosened the soil, and to an area that wasn't prone to that much rain. And what happens when you have no rain, lots of rain, and dirt? Mudslides. Sean says Japan was working on it to see if they could cut down on monsoons. Yep. They do a lot of projects. Like I said, a lot of these projects and ideas that they have, even and this goes even to the aspect of like using it as a weapon, military using it as a weapon and whatnot. I fully believe that they come up with these ideas with good intent, right? To fix, stop, or make life easier. But I think one of the biggest issues is when you see the aspects of it that can be weaponized, that then trumps everything. A lot of people know about like Project what is it? I forget the name. It's like Project Orange or something like that. That was in the Korean War when we did extensive cloud seeding and created monsoons in off season for monsoons. Like one of those situations is they are supposed to have not be able to do that anymore, but with the numbers and how they qualify whether or not it actually worked, you could never prove that that's exactly what they did unless you were able to get some classified information about it. But that can be redacted and marked off, so you probably wouldn't even see it. But the reality is I don't think a small treaty that bans weather modification as a weapon is going to stop our militaries from doing it. I really don't think that's the case. Let me see. See, what I was going to do is I was going to find the SE Montreal conversation with them. But now that I think about it, thinking maybe I'll just find something that I had about this topic we're talking about. But I'll have to find it first. No. I'm going to play the Montreal thing. I don't want to go into a geoengineering weather modification spiel and then go, hey, you guys can listen to me talk about it like I did before. If I wanted to say the stuff on there, I'd just say it now. So what I will do is I will find the SE Montreal conversation and I'll play a small bit of that while I let my dogs out.
So can you take this time and do something with it like you claim you can?
Yeah, I can count those periods, right, and create a clock that tells me it's noon.
Okay, so you got noon. How do you make noon fabric?
Oh, so well, I want you to get secure in the idea that time isn't just a concept.
It is. It is. Time is a concept. It's just a man-made concept. You cannot show me otherwise.
Is red a concept?
Don't ask me things that are not.
Red is a concept, but red is a concept, isn't it?
Red is a concept?
Yeah, red is a concept.
I can't show you a red rose?
Exactly. It's a concept that
okay, now show me time.
Yeah, it's the period between events.
You can't do it. So your theory, which is not a theory, falters at the basic, like at the foundation.
Here, I'll show you one. I'll show you.
SE, concepts refer to things in the world, right? Red.
You can't build a house with a false brick. You can't put time. Can you put time as your mortar?
I didn't say that's what it was. I said it's the period between events.
This is some shady arguments you're making now, as in Montreal. You basically this is a DMOC argument. You're wanting a cut of time.
I'm showing you that. I'm showing you can't even build. You don't even have a brick to start building your house. Is what I'm showing you. You don't even have a brick.
If I can show you what time is now, and now. That was time. That was
now and events. Now. Okay, nice.
Yeah, that was 2 events, right? Yeah. And that was time.
The problem, Essie, is you don't know the difference between ideas and things.
Okay, so now take the now and combine it with space and make a fabric. See what I mean? It's like
you know what space is.
You've been sold a bag of goods, guys, and you're trying to lawyer it, but I mean you can't do it. It's against physics.
Essay, you simply don't understand it. And
right, I knew that was coming. That you don't understand.
Well, you do. If you do, then explain it.
Bro,
The
I'll
fabric of
explain it to you.
space-time
You have
is
a
the
concept. This is not rocket science, right? Well, it is kind of, but
well, yeah,
you
it's
have a
beyond
concept.
that.
That you asked me to explain. Would you like me to explain it or not?
Start by telling me how space-time is not a metaphor.
Well, it is a metaphor. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's a made-up thing.
Well, nobody's ever said it
doesn't
was anything
exist.
but that. Se.
It doesn't exist. This
The fabric of
space-time
space-time
thing.
is not a physical thing. You can't put it in a bucket and take it to the lab like DMOC wants to.
Okay,
The
shout
fabric
out
of
D-Mark.
space-time
So
is a
how does it?
fucking is a metaphor, and it's simply describing the fact that space and time are intrinsically linked to one another. It's
But you can't
it's just a
show
way
that,
to
bro.
visualize it. Just a way to visualize it. And if you're not capable of doing that, then go to another topic.
I know this is tough for you guys. I get it, man.
No, it's
I
you
mean,
that's having the problem,
I tell you?
not us.
Bro, if you can't explain your concept that to make it make sense, you have nothing, bro. I mean, like Sun Tzu said, it's up to the general to explain the plan. If you can't explain the plan, you got nothing, bro. I'm sorry.
I got mass attracting mass. That's good enough, SE.
Based on calculation from space-time.
You remember the hard time you were having, Blue, trying to eliminate?
Blue got the results, which was expected by using in the calculation of space-time. Isn't that so, Blue?
I didn't have to use general relativity.
Okay. Yeah, but you could have.
You can if you want to, but everything on the left side of that of Einstein's equation, field equations, falls out. That all goes to the weak field limit. The right side of the equation describes Newtonian physics.
You see what I mean? There's dualities everywhere, guys.
Yes, there are, I guess, SE, if you want to think of it that way.
Well, I do, Blue.
We enjoy using simplified methods of thinking about things, especially when the complicated method doesn't give a different result. I could not have employed general relativity and gotten a different result than the one I was able to get.
Blue, you're an engineer, right, by trade. You gotta understand more than me, more than most of us. This duality stuff in physics is like it's counterintuitive, to say the least.
Right. It is counterintuitive to say that light is both a particle and a wave. And we teach students, that it's a wave in some situations and it's a particle in others. But the truth is, it's both a particle and a wave, and it's the truth is very, very complicated.
You see, that's another.
Wait, so something just popped in my head. When that's brought up, and it said that light could be looked at as a particle or a wave, is that the same situation as like us looking at whether or not Earth is an open or closed system? Like it would explicitly matter to the application of it. Like what are you trying to figure out or do with what you're doing, and that's how you would look at it. That's just something that popped in my head just now when I was listening.
Fib that they say, right? It's another fib. That's another duality. Yeah,
it's a duality, but it's not a fib.
Well, if you
recording.
No, I was just playing over the conversation that SE Montreal and some of the people at Globe Gangsters. I don't think you were there for that one. Not sure. They were talking
Probably wasn't.
Yeah, they were like talking about time and all that kind of stuff, and it kind of made me wonder when you'd be a good person to ask the idea of time, or hang on. No, let me.
You were talking about space particle duality.
Yeah, when people look at light and they're saying it's looked at like a particle and a wave, is that the same circumstance as looking at Earth as an open closed system? Not being the same, but the application of which you're using it would be the correct terminology for it.
I suppose so. The context kind of matters for that. So there's one physicist, Sean Carroll, who likes to say that we actually do have an answer about which one it is, whether it's the particle or the wave. And the correct answer is actually the field and the disturbance of the field, which is sort of tending a little bit more towards the wave explanation. But the thing is that the way we describe fields, especially in quantum field theory, is not the kind of naive kind of description, the way you think about like a wave in a pond. And the wave particle duality comes into play in different aspects about whether we're trying to explain the behaviors of individual particles or a collection of particles. Because most typically, well, it's a little bit more difficult than that. I'm not entirely sure whether it's really analogous to open closed system for the Earth. I guess it kind of you might say that it kind of depends upon the context which you're working in. Then that's when the distinction comes into play.
Yeah, that's basically what I mean, because it's like in the terms of open and close, it'd be, are you looking at it from an engineering perspective, or are you looking at it as from the physics perspective of it?
Sort of, I guess. Yeah, you might say. I mean, I don't think really too many aspects of the concepts map onto each other, so the analogy breaks down real fast, I think. So I just generally tend not to think about it in terms of many an analogy. The wave particle duality really is a bit weird, and I think the way Sean Carroll describes it is kind of most natural in that the fundamental thing are fields. So basically the wave propagations in a field is the fundamental aspect of nature. But when we interact with the system, we see it resolve as individual point particles, so to speak. So you don't
Okay.
see the wave, you just see the sort of point interaction.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's a bit of a weird construct. It has characteristics of both, but ultimately, yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like you're trying to pass through the eye of a needle here. The fundamental aspect of reality you can never directly access, and that is the field. So, but when you try and interact with it, you always have to pass through that narrow point, which is the particle, so to speak. I don't know if that really makes sense.
It makes something.
So, the classical double slit experiment is a kind of a direct explanation or direct example of it, where you have to kind of confront the duality aspect of it. So we can generate a single particle wave duality double slit experiment. You know what those are, right?
Yes, that's
Yes. Are you
the
familiar with
wave
the
through
single
the.
part? Yeah, and are you familiar with the single particle version of it?
You're cutting out. Is that me? Hang on. I don't know if it's. Are you
I
in a
don't know.
bad spot?
I am on wired internet, so I am at home, so I
Should
should be
be
on
all right.
optical.
I'm closing some windows just in case. Okay, that should be good.
Okay, let's
Ooh,
try this
ask
again.
about. Yeah, ask the last question.
So, are you familiar with the single particle version of the double slit experiment?
No.
Okay. So what happens is, the double slit experiment basically tests the interference pattern uh, for light or for whatever kind of a quantum mechanical system, right? So where you have two slits of fairly narrow slits that are separated by some distance,
Mhm.
and when you pass the light through it, you get an interference pattern on the other side on like a mask, right? So you
Okay.
get that kind of, the pattern, what I mean, right?
Yeah, yeah. It looks like
Okay.
if you threw two rocks in the water at the same time when those intersect.
Yes, exactly. So that is uh, So that is what you get when two waves interfere with each other. That's why it's called the interference pattern. But the funny part, something funny happens when you start reducing the intensity of the light source to the point where you can actually put on the other side for the detection, you can put in a sufficiently sensitive sensor, something like a CCD or a photomultiplier tube, which is actually able to detect individual photons. So you literally get individual blips on it. You can count them,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So at this point, you have, at any given time, through the two slits, there's only one particle going through. You are sure of that because your sensor detects all the ones that went through. But, so obviously, then the experiment's going to take quite a while to run. But what happens is, even though you have individual particles going through one at a time, sort of like that image there, you still get an interference pattern at the end of the day. Once you sum them all up. Or here's another version of maybe a prettier picture.
Wait, you're not showing anything. Oh, wait. Okay.
I've sent
yeah.
the links there.
Yeah, I'm getting it right now.
Maybe that'll work.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes more sense.
Right. So what happens there is that you get, so you get, this is basically over time a view of the received photons. And you'll see that initially, they come in as individual points, and this is, spread over time. So at any given time, it's only receiving one photon, so that you can only a few photons per second basically onto the receiving mask. And if you run it for a few hours, you will eventually build up a pattern that is still an interference pattern. But wait, we just said that there's a single photon going through two slits. So what happened? Did the photon go through both slits and interfere with itself?
That is weird.
Right, and so here you have to basically confront the wave-particle duality weirdness, where the photon, yes, technically by quantum field theory, it actually went through both slits at the same time because the underlying field disturbance is a wave. But when it came to interacting with the detector, the interaction only collapses to a single point. See what I mean?
Yes. Okay, so that's why it's so definitive.
Yeah, it's the ultimate, I would say, the ultimate proof of quantum weirdness, but it falls out naturally out of the equations of quantum mechanics, and it is absolutely repeatable. In fact, students at universities can run this experiment. There are many a university where you'll be able to basically set this up or have this set up and run it as a lab exercise just for fun. So it's not a thing that is somehow, extremely abstract or unreachable. No, this is kind of stuff you can actually do yourself.
This is stuff like okay. Oh, okay. So this version of doing it shows the explanation is correct rather than the very
Yes.
simplistic way of using waves.
If you just assume that it was a wave, or if you just assume that it was a particle, if it was just a wave, then you would never get those pinpricks of light at the start.
Yeah.
It would all sort of rise as a uniform intensity of wave reception. Every pixel would activate just to a different degree. You would basically get like the bottom right image just faded out and very slowly fading in completed. But you don't
Yeah.
do that.
You would see it.
What
We're seeing is it collimate itself.
you get individual impacts on the CCD, but over time, as you sum up all the impacts, they form that interference pattern again. So it seems like the wave itself of of light, or the electromagnetic wave, was more of a, it typically is interpreted as your probability that you're going to be finding the electron at any given point. It doesn't say that you will find it absolutely for sure here, but it says that in those bands, when the photon interacts, you are most likely to find it in those brightest parts of the bands there. Whereas in the dark spots, you're almost never going to find any photon at all.
Yeah. Nothing interacting at all.
Yes. And so that's the sort of nature of the entire, this is called the wave equation, essentially.
Mhm.
And this basically describes the behavior of fundamentally all quantum systems. How you interpret that, what's happening actually sort of underneath, is a matter of interpretation. The equations do not say one way or the other, whether it was a wave or it was a particle or it was both or whatever, something completely different happening underneath. We don't know. The mathematics that predict the behavior work. They predict this behavior, and they are extremely accurate.
So then, so with the ultimate argument about light being a wave or a particle, the answer is always going to be yes.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Because
Yep.
because if it was one or the other, one or the other of these tests would not be working. It would not be predictable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you couldn't reasonably say that, hey, if I have a single photon going through it and it's just a particle, you could always you could never say that, okay, how the hell is a single particle going through two places at the same time and interfering with itself? That doesn't
Wait,
make sense.
why don't we look at all particles and stuff this way?
Well, we kind of do, actually. All elementary particles in quantum mechanics essentially obey this behavior.
Do we look at them all? So we do classify them all as particle and waves?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that part. That's
Yep.
actually a really important part to understand when people are talking about that.
Yeah,
Talking about light.
you can reproduce this behavior not just using photons. It'll behave the same if you use electrons. In fact, it should behave that way even if you use something like, well, quarks are difficult to get individual, but protons themselves would also form this kind of behavior. Although protons are, strictly speaking, quarks are the fundamental particles that comprise protons, and a proton is technically not a fundamental particle because it's composed of other stuff, but they still obey wave-particle duality if you set up the experiment correctly.
So quarks are the ones that mysteriously just pop up, or no, those are
Quarks are the things that basically constitute a proton and a neutron.
okay.
A proton and a neutron is always composed of three quarks.
Gluon. Okay, then gluon. Yeah. Okay. Just
Gluons,
remembering the steps.
gluons are different. Those are particles that mediate the strong force between the quarks.
Yes, between. Yeah, that's how I always remember that because it's the glue.
Yeah, so to speak. And not just between the quarks, but between protons individually and neutrons. So that's it's the strong force is the one that holds it together. It's the glue force.
Yeah.
And then there are other particles like W and Z bosons, which mediate the weak nuclear force, and those guys still, gluons and W and Z bosons, are also obey wave particle duality. They also have this kind of a property, but they're extremely short lived. So we generally don't run them through this kind of experiment.
Okay. It would just be flips and phases of it that wouldn't be able to really register as
Yes.
factual.
Yeah, gluons are, I don't think they've ever been reproduced outside of an atomic nucleus. We only know about them indirectly through their effects on other particles that are long-lived.
Which particle is the one that pops in and out for no reason or whatever?
They all actually kind of do.
Yeah, but isn't there one that we can't we can't predict it will be there? It just is there, and then it simultaneously is somewhere else.
They all do. They all exhibit this property.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Because I swear there was one that.
What you're thinking about is the distinction between real particles and virtual particles. And it is those virtual particles are particles that live for a time period shorter than the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. There's a limit basically for how long and what energy they can have. And so they exist for extremely short periods of time at a very low energy level in the quantum vacuum. They will pop in and out of the vacuum. And they
So those
basically give
okay.
like,
So those are the ones that are unpredictable.
yes, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, they're not unpredictable in the sense that there's there's no way to think about them. You can't think about them. It's just more a matter of all quantum mechanics is fundamentally stochastic. It's probabilistic. You cannot directly say, it's not purely mechanistic to where you say, this guy bumped into this thing, therefore it flew off at this angle, and therefore that's always going to be the case. Or if you detect, if you detect a specific event, that therefore there had to be this other cause before it. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit more disconnected than that. Like, say, for instance, nuclear decay. Nuclear decay is fundamentally a random process. There's nothing directly causing a specific nucleus to decay.
Time?
Well, time, I guess, yeah, in that sense. But you
Yeah,
can't
but I see
say
what you're
that.
saying.
You can't pick up a nucleus and say that this guy has an internal clock set to 5 seconds from now, and 5 seconds from now he for sure is gonna pop out poop out a beta particle or something like that. That you can't say ahead of time. You can say that this guy, on average, in 5 seconds, one of these guys is gonna poop out a beta particle. That's about all you can say.
And then okay, and so would the virtual particles be that part that is
Now, virtual
ex-
particles are a feature of the vacuum. They're just
oh,
inherently
okay.
there. Yes,
Okay,
they're
the
just
virtual
inherently there.
okay, virtual particles are the stuff that we don't have to do with, the things that are there regardless of what we're doing.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. That definitely helps the clarification of it.
We
'Cause
can
I was
predict where they're more likely to be, but we
mhm.
can't say for sure that, hey, therefore, it's going to pop out here in exactly 5 minutes time. That's not how that works.
Okay. So when we see them, quote unquote, that is when we mark that they exist. It's not a they
So
will
to
be there
speak, and
because, or they better yet, they don't have a line to this will happen and this is why they'll be there. They don't have that part.
that and virtual particles are not actually directly observable. We observe their effects.
Yeah,
They exist for they exist for such a short period of time that we can't observe them directly.
it's kind of like with if a particle, B particle collide, the virtual particle is that instant.
Say that again.
So like I'm trying to think. It's like when they collide, do the particle colliding and all that kind of crap. It'd
Mm-hmm.
be like the interaction, like when the split second they interact would be the virtual particle.
The second they interact, it's a little bit um, it's a little bit more weird than that. Virtual particles can mediate forces, and they can come into existence and annihilate on their own, but there are multiple different conditions under which they can be produced. And yeah, so for instance, say you have a magnet or you have a particle, near another particle. They both have a magnetic moment. And let's say they both are, they have a magnetic, they're oriented in such a way that they will magnetically repel each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine that, right? So they're like
Yes,
two tiny little bar magnets.
like two
And the
souths
way,
together.
for example, yes. And so on a quantum mechanical level, the way we describe it is that they exchange a virtual photon. So we'll never be able to see in between them flying a photon flying around. But what will happen is basically one of them will emit a virtual photon that's immediately going to essentially disappear and reappear. Not, it won't traverse the quantum vacuum at, infinite speed. It's more like one of them will emit a virtual photon that's going to go into the electromagnetic field. And then on the other side, the electromagnetic field will poop out another virtual photon, and that'll cause a recoil of the other particle.
This is what you're talking. So, okay, so when we look at, I think we've looked at this before. So when we're looking at like a bar magnet and we're showing those arrows, and
Um,
some simulations it'll turn white and red to show you the force charge. I think it is. It's kind of like that. That's what a vertical particle would be.
So it's like, say for instance here, this is what's called a Feynman diagram. You've seen those.
Yes.
Yeah, so what's happening here is that it usually should be the line of the gamma there. That's a symbol for a photon should be a little bit slanted, but whatever. So what happens here is that these two, it's a photon and a positron, and they both recoil when they interact. And so what this would imply, well, typically, let me think here. Oh, this is for a real particle interaction. Whatever. This is the one I wanted. Yes. Hang on. Yeah, anyway, the point is, I can't find the nice diagram here quickly. What happens is essentially that particle interactions, what the electrons are doing is they're basically coming together, exchanging a virtual photon, and that's causing a recoil between them. So they both change direction of motion, but you perceive it as a sort of force interaction between them, but at the fundamental level, what we say is what happened is that they exchanged a virtual particle which you will never be able to directly detect, but you'd be able to see the effect of the exchange.
Okay, I see. It's okay. Okay, so it's basically that exchange, the fact that there is a change that is classified as a virtual particle because it's not an observable. It's not something you can observe making the change.
I found a
The
nice
cause.
GIF showing it exactly perfect. Yeah, two electrons repulsing from each other through electric forces. There we go. I hope it'll load it right.
It did not load for me.
Okay, let me send you the GIF directly on Discord then.
Okay.
Let's see, where the hell did it save? Okay. Neat. There you go.
Pulling it up.
Feel free to grab that up in a browser and it'll show you what I mean.
There we go. Let me share it. There we go.
Right. So the narrative here is that you have two electrons that are repulsing each other via electric interactions. And what's happening is that there's an electric field between them, but you're not going to be able to see a real photon flying up from one to the other. What happens instead is that we say that at a fundamental level, so time flows from bottom up, and space is represented as the x-axis on here. So the two electrons are coming together, and an interaction starts with the left electron emitting a virtual photon, which causes the left electron to recoil due to momentum conservation. And then when that photon interacts with the right electron, that causes the other electron to absorb that momentum and recoil the other way.
And there's no known understanding of how that electron created the virtual particle.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, we don't know the mechanism, but we just know that it
happens.
The theory says that they do.
Yeah.
But you're never going to be able to observe the photon directly. You only see the effects on the electrons, in that they come together and then they recoil and fly apart again.
So when we see one do this, we typically see another electron do it as well, and that's
yes.
Okay.
It has to, yeah. The only time that this interaction can happen is between two electrons. There's never going to be like that one, that left electron on the left side just bumbling about and just firing off a virtual photon, and that virtual photon never going anywhere, or never hitting another or interacting with another electron, is because that would cause the virtual photon to turn into a real photon, which it cannot do for complicated reasons.
Okay, so we see it. We see this interaction happen, and then there are times we don't see the interaction happen, and that's how. Okay.
Yes, for this interaction path to happen, there have to be 2 electrons present, within a certain range, and that's when you observe the recoil effect.
If we made a Feynman diagram like this for gravity, would
Yes.
gravity be that virtual particle?
That'd be a graviton, yes. That
Okay.
is the going model for quantum gravity. If you're using gravitons, then yes, every particle that interacts with gravity would emit a graviton, and that once that interacts with another particle, instead of recoiling away, they would attract to each other.
So
They'd recoil
basically,
towards each other.
so they would look like this diagram where they're coming up, and then once they
Mhm.
get to that interaction, the lines instead of going opposite way, they would actually cross each other.
Come together,
Yeah, yeah.
tighter.
Okay,
So
as
in
the
that case, you would typically start the bottom parts of the diagram going away from each other, and then you draw them that they are coming to get back together. Yes.
okay. So it almost form a triangle rather than
Uh-huh. Yep.
X split apart. God, I
Yep.
love Feynman diagrams. They make shit so much simpler.
Yeah, of course. I mean, behind all of this is going to be a truckload of equations
Yeah.
that Feynman was just looking for a visual method to describe what the equations are saying. And there's a lot more details that this kind of skirts over.
Mhm.
But it lets you get a nice beat for what happens with fundamental things like momentum conservation, because momentum is still conserved in all these interactions. So yeah, that's kind of the idea.
That's so crazy. I could look at Feynman diagrams all day. I'm just staring at it. It's awesome.
Yep. So that's why we say that things like magnetism and electromagnetic radiation that is very low intensity is mediated by virtual particles, because they are so low energy that they'll never show up as real particles. It's not like you're shooting out a beam of electrons. That'd be bad.
You can't stop those things. Okay, that was going to ask you.
I mean, you
Um,
can, but you don't want
this
to. You don't want to
this
be shooting. We don't want to be irradiating stuff.
like this like I always thought like these particles and stuff like they kind of just pass through us all. Like they're always here. They just kind of pass through everything.
Hmm.
If that's the case,
Which
then
ones?
yeah, okay, that's probably the answer then. Because I was thinking like when CERN does their tests, aren't there things they do that just kind of just go out into the world when they do these tests?
Yeah, neutrinos. Neutrinos.
Okay, yes, all those things just confuse me. I don't understand how they could ever say one came from billions of years away. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So neutrinos are produced in nuclear reactions or high energy interactions. The way that they are detected is one of the theories in the 1930s was, well, it's actually they were predicted in 1930. I think it was by Wolfgang Pauli. Didn't I say that? Yeah. And so they were studying various types, various modes of radioactive decay. So when you take something like a lumpy uranium, you know that it emits particles, right? It emits some radiation, and they were observing that it was emitting a kind of radiation where they saw that it was a very heavy, positively charged particle. They named it the alpha, just alpha particle. How creatively named. And that was before they actually knew that it was a helium nucleus, but they named it the alpha particle. And there was an aspect of that radioactive decay where there was some theories about the structure of the atom, quantum mechanics, that kind of stuff, where some part of the interaction one part of the sort of symmetries of nature wasn't being preserved in the interaction. And let me see, actually, let me check that, make sure I'm not talking bullshit here. Alpha decay, or is it beta decay is the one that fires off a neutrino? Yeah, I think it's a yeah, there we go. So it's actually beta decay. It's so uranium doesn't decay using beta decay, but there's a bunch of stuff on the decay chain of uranium and some other heavy elements where beta decay occurs. Beta decay is the emission of an electron. where the nucleus, what happens is that the nucleus, let me throw that up if you have it. So this is the Wikipedia page. So nuclei have a limited ability to hold on to their nucleons, right? The elementary particles that are part of the nucleus. And so sometimes many very heavy elements are not, they have basically too many protons. And sorry, they have too many neutrons. And so they would much rather have more protons instead of the extra neutrons that they have. So what will happen is they'll convert a neutron into a proton. And how do you do that? Well, neutron has zero electric charge, right? So it has no electrical charge, and you got to make a proton out of it, which has positive electric charge. So what do you do? One of the fundamental properties of nature is charge conservation. The amount of electric charge in an interaction has to be same at the start as at the end. You can't destroy it. It's sort of like energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what do? Well, you need to shoot out an electron. You basically got to take a bunch of negative charge out of the neutron, and then you get a positive charge out of it, right? It's like +1, -1. If you want to have a +1 here, you gotta throw out the -1 somewhere. And there was a little bit of, so what they found is that this is nice, this works, but there's a little bit of momentum, basically linear momentum, that doesn't get conserved by this interaction. There's something extra, basically, when you start, and that's another one of those properties that is super duper conserved, we think, is that when you have a certain amount of momentum in a system, you can't destroy momentum. You got to put it somewhere. So if you shoot out a particle one way, the rest of the system has to recoil in the other direction. And those two, again, have to sum to the same number at the start as at the end. That's basically the principle by which rockets fly. And so they found that there was a little bit of extra. There's something extra, or sorry, there was a little bit of momentum missing from the product, and they weren't sure where the hell it went. And they were very certain that, well, it can't just disappear, right? That would be that would be violation of momentum conservation. That'd be a big deal for physics.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, so they hypothesized that there's probably some particle that's flying off, that's carrying off the extra momentum, but we're not sure because we can't see it. So it's got to be a particle. It's got to be a particle that interacts extremely weakly with the environment. And they calculated, okay, so if we have this many atoms in our detector, and what is the cross section of the interaction, blah 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 blah, and they basically figured out that it's probably got to be a particle that's going to have an interaction chance, a probability of extremely low, some number, some chance of it interacting with something. And so they've hypothesized that, okay, so what if we make a ginormous tank with stuff in it, something like water? And we make it super duper clear. We make it super duper clean water, and we put a bunch of detectors around it. And on the off chance that one of these guys flying by bumps into something, he might cause a very brief flash. Some energy basically is gonna. So we basically array a bunch of photo detectors around that giant water tank, and we isolate the thing correctly so that there's nothing else coming in. It's only these guys that are going to be able to come through. And if we see that flash, then we can, we've confirmed that there's something flying through that we know interacts very, very weakly. And it might be our candidate particle. And it took until 1956 until the first detection of a neutrino. That's what we call now a neutrino, which is a particle that does not interact with the electromagnetic force. It only interacts with the weak nuclear force, which is and gravity, which is an extremely weak interaction. Neutrinos are also extremely low mass.
I was gonna say, because so the picture. So you were just saying how they detected it. The image I'm showing now is the first time they visualized it, right? The observation of it. Is that what you were describing that a minute ago, right? The tank.
Yeah. So we presume. Yeah. So when a neutrino interacts, we don't see the neutrino directly. We instead see the sort of debris of the interaction, where it carries energy. It sometimes carries quite a lot of energy. It goes very fast, and then when it bumps into something, it'll dump the energy into it, and that can create like streaks and like paths in the matter. And based upon the properties of what the recoil was and what the path was and that kind of stuff, you can actually estimate what happened, what bumped into it. sort of like you seeing the result of a car crash. You can estimate the speed of the vehicle and how much payload was on it.
So when they're looking for neutrinos,
yeah, we're looking for the debris of the interaction.
So is it even possible to say a neutrino is from somewhere else?
Yes. So the characteristics of the interaction it will go in a particular way. So you can, for example, tell which way the neutrino came, because they will focus typically on one side of the detector instead of the other. So you can see like streaks in it.
So if it's earthbound or from Earth, it will obviously be coming from the direction of
Yes.
Earth. And when they say comes from
the sun,
some distant galaxy, it's coming from that. It's coming from that direction. And
yes, it
that
will
would
have. Yeah, there will be some telltale signs of where the neutrino came, what energy it had, and even we now know there's actually multiple different types of neutrino based upon its originating mechanism by which it arose.
So when they're looking for a neutrino, like in this picture as an example, they may be getting these interactions in all different directions, but they're primarily looking for a reaction. I don't want to say neutrino, a reaction that would be coming from not here. And then once they've established that it's coming from a direction not earthly, is it a situation of, well, what is the first thing we can see in that direction? Is that how they would say it comes from a different galaxy? You are muted.
Sorry. Yeah, sort of. And so one of the problems with neutrinos is that you get a constant bath of them from the sun and from various nuclear reactions, even here on Earth. Mm-hmm. So you have to be kind of able to disentangle what you're seeing. And even so, you get very few interactions. You get maybe a few interactions a day in a large detector.
Okay, so it's not an endless amount of reactions happening. Okay.
No. You get a few interactions a day, maybe. And that's for a tank that has like 10,000 tons of, super clear water or some, what do they use? They use some chemical, glycol or something. I don't know. So here's an experiment that actually
was that like is a super specific, purifies it.
I don't know what exact type of chemical they use. It's a fluid. It's typically a very highly transparent liquid. It's one of the big neutrino detectors from the 80s, I think. And obviously there are now even better ones. Yeah, the construction began in 1982. And so this is how you can test. And there's a bunch of other neutrino detectors all over the place. One of the funny parts is that for neutrinos, because their interaction cross section is so low, you can actually build a neutrino detector quite a ways away from, if you have like an experiment like CERN's Large Hadron Collider, which produces some amount of neutrinos in it, you can actually build the detector hundreds of miles away. It'll still work just fine. Because of the Earth in the middle is mostly transparent to neutrinos.
Okay, so okay, I see. So these yellow lines in this picture would depict the path of a neutrino coming in.
So that is just a general picture for high energy physics on Wikipedia. That is a view. If you look, if you go back, it'll show you that it's a simulated Large Hadron Collider CMS particle detector depicting a Higgs boson interaction. That is the internals of a particle detector in like the LHC.
Okay, so this is not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean the neutrinos. Many of the interactions of the LHC will produce neutrinos. In fact, probably most of them will, and they produce a decent amount of them. Millions and millions of neutrinos a second. But the neutrinos have such low interaction cross section that the detector in the LHC is not actually designed to look for them. That they basically just fly out and they leave. Most of them will never go anywhere near the detector that's in like northern Italy. There's one, I think, for neutrinos, but some of them eventually, will fly through there. If you shoot enough in the air, eventually you'll hit something. And so some of them do, of course, encounter the detector. And the detector is not in any way magical in that it just causes neutrinos to stop. No, most of them, again, fly right through the detector.
Mm-hmm.
But on
It's
occasion, one of those neutrinos will interact with a particle in the detector, will bounce off and produce one of those light recoils. We'll produce one of those. It's typically, through mechanisms like Cherenkov radiation, where it bumps a particle at very high velocity inside of the detector, which causes a light flash in the detector, and that's what they see. And based upon the direction from which the neutrino came and how the light flash behaved, they can tell that, okay, this one's probably came from the LHC.
And I think I've heard you say the neutrinos are pretty pointless, right? As far as us.
I mean, they're useful for high energy physics and studying physics, but as far as practical application, which your day-to-day life is, no, they don't mean anything. They don't do anything for you.
And I don't know if this sounds weird in my head to ask this. Could you stop? Is there a way to stop them?
No. Well, the only chance is if you have enough material in the way, and typically it is sort of said that for a neutrino to have a 50% chance of interaction with a particle, you need about a light year of lead. That's how low of an interaction cross-section they have. If you had a lead rod with a neutrino flying lengthways through it, the rod would have to be about a light year long, and even then you only have about a 50-50 chance of trapping the fucking thing.
But if you trapped it, is it something you would be able to observe?
No, it would interact with whatever. No, it would interact with some subatomic particle, and it would
within
cause a
it.
recoil.
Okay.
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yeah, it would get essentially destroyed in the interaction, and it will cause that particle, for example, to take on the kinetic energy of the neutrino. That will cause it to recoil at a very high velocity inside of a detector, and that's what causes Cherenkov radiation. That's what you see.
Okay. Okay. So if we use that light year of lead, it would just give us the opportunity to watch this interaction happen and be like, it's happening right there, right there, right there.
Well, it would happen somewhere in that light year of lead. You couldn't
Okay.
really tell where.
Okay.
Not ahead of time, anyway.
So a neutrino only gets one shot at fucking something up.
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much. And so the way we do this, obviously, we can't build a detector that's a light year long. That's a little bit impractical. Can't really put that in your shed, unless you have a very big shed. So the way we do this is we basically go by volume of interaction. We basically, instead of trying to capture a specific neutrino, we just go by firing so fucking many neutrinos at the detector that eventually something's got to bump.
Okay.
And even then, you only get a few interactions a day.
So okay. So as far as physics is concerned, it's a happenstance. It happens to happen when we. Okay.
Yep, it's typically how most high energy physics is done. Instead of trying for every single interaction, you instead just go scattershot and reassemble the pieces from the debris. What happened? That's how all particle accelerators work.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember a long time ago when this discussion was being talked about. Someone like sourced me to a picture that illustrated, these collisions, and I guess it was like, and I don't remember exactly what they found, but I remember the whole reasoning for it is that at one point in time they had done one of these tests, and so many things happened that they didn't know where to start and didn't know what was what. And I don't remember exactly what it was. It may have been one of the big discoveries, but I do remember the person talking about it being a situation where it's just sometimes something happens and they kind of just throw it away because they can't even explain the second interactions that start.
Yeah, so typically high energy particle accelerators will do this. They'll have a bunch of And so the detectors, when you talk about something like the LHC, it's CMS and the Atlas detector and that kind of stuff, what they are really is essentially ginormous photographic cameras that are arranged around the beam tube. And when we steer the beams inside of the accelerator, what they are, in fact, is not, it's not a continuous beam of particles. Instead, they are segmented into little packets of particles, each of them several million protons. So it's still a fairly small amount. But we have a few tens of thousands of these packets orbiting at any given time in the beam tube in both directions. And they're designed, the beam tubes are designed in such a way that they bring the packets together right inside of the detector, and there's a chance that as the packets pass through each other at very high velocity, that there's going to be something interesting happening. Some interesting interaction is going to happen, and even so, you only get from out of a a packet of, let's say, 100 million protons passing right through each other, two packets, you only get maybe 10 to 20, maybe 100 interactions at any given point. But we solve that by basically whirling around tens of thousands of these packets at the same time, so that you basically boost up the it's called the luminosity of the detector. The amount of interactions basically compound up over time. You just have so many of these interactions going on. Most of them are completely mundane, absolutely uninteresting stuff happening. It's
Do
literally
they
just
are they getting a full spectrum of these interactions, or are these just blips in
so
spans?
well, full spectrum, as in most of the interactions that happen are the ones that are most probable to happen. It's one of the things about quantum mechanics is it tells you the probability of a given interaction happening. And what we're doing is we're trying to get the energies and the luminosity up high enough such that interesting stuff on occasion, even the unlikely stuff, will happen. And then we basically sort through the debris of those interactions. You get things like particles which recoil off of each other. They will typically then start generating a bunch of other particles in that collision event. It's not like bashing two balls together.
Okay.
Subatomic particles do not have a definite size. They are in fact point-like. We treat them as point-like. But as they get very close together, they are going extremely high velocity, so they have a lot of energy. Out of that that highly energetic close encounter, what happens is that particle physics kicks in. And one of the funny parts about quantum mechanics is that it says that if something weird can happen, it will happen if the conditions are right. And these collisions are one of those conditions where things are sort of right for interesting things to happen. So most of the time, nothing interesting will happen, but on occasion, you might get a weird particle in there somewhere momentarily being created, something like the Higgs boson, a real Higgs boson, not a virtual one, which is virtual Higgs bosons are the ones that mediate mass. But occasionally, you will have enough energy and just the right conditions and just the right sort of chance that you will get a Higgs boson being created for a femtosecond, right? A very, very short, brief moment in time. That Higgs boson will not make it even, let's say, a millimeter inside of the detector before it decays. Higgs bosons have extremely short lifespans.
Mhm.
So it'll sit there it'll fly through the detector only for about a femtosecond, and it'll immediately then decay. And our quantum physics models then say that, okay, when a Higgs boson decays, we predict that it will decay into this, and that decay product. Let's say it'll emit an electron neutrino and a high energy photon of a certain energy, and then maybe a muon or something like that. And then we know that, for example, the muon itself will also decay into something else, and which will be a little bit longer lived, which our detectors can directly sort of image. And then you look through the debris of the interaction, based upon the paths and the velocities of the trash that came out of it, the debris, you reconstruct that, okay, what was the original collision or the original interaction that caused this? And that's where we are basically looking for this very slight blip of, hey, we think this interaction here
Could
conforms
be.
to what we predict came out of a Higgs interaction.
Wait, so
And then you
when they do this, so like I got the image up on the screen right now. So they take an image
Mhm.
of these interactions. They
Yes,
literally play Where's Waldo with a
very much
million
so.
piece puzzle
Yes,
basically.
it's the biggest needle in a haystack search ever.
Damn.
So yeah, you basically let's imagine it's a haystack the size of the planet, and the needle is the size of an atom, so to speak. So that's what they essentially do. And well, so to speak, I'm sort of exaggerating here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
you generate an enormous amount of data from these interactions. These detectors take millions and millions of data samples per second. In fact, gigabytes per second is what they generate, each of them. And then you get to the data processing, which is really the key to this whole endeavor. That's kind of what makes these detectors even possible. Because you just got an enormous amount of data, most of which is, again, completely uninteresting. So then you get down to the filtering processing, where you have first, second, and third and fourth stage filtering, where you basically whittle down the data, and you basically throw away all the trash that's not interesting. Just your standard, bog standard, proton to
Yeah.
proton, photon interaction. You just throw that out right at the first stage. Then it gets down. You at that point you've, let's say, eliminated 80% of the data. Then you take that 20% of the data that's remaining and you put that into a second stage filter, which is just some more, computationally expensive analysis, and it still does it in real time. But because it's less data, it can actually get it done in real time.
Yeah.
And that takes it down from, let's say, 100 gigabytes per second down to 10 gigabytes a second, down to 1 gigabyte a second. And at the end of the day, you end up with something like, I don't know, a few hundred megabytes a second worth of interactions that are kind of interesting. Something happened there that might be a possible candidate for what you're looking for. You store that on the CERN has a giant, server farm with lots and lots of data storage capability. You store that there, and you make that data available to all your participating experimental scientists that are then going to run that data through some highly computationally intensive, supercomputer clusters to figure out, okay, what's this interaction here, or which one of these interactions was a potential candidate, and you hone in on the stuff that's in there that might be interesting.
Wait, so that means that there's probably server rooms full of data for interactions with zero understanding, because they would
Potential.
need
Yeah, of course.
they would need a second interaction to happen this way to then categorize it as an event, right?
Not just second. They probably need dozens of them to be able to identify. Yes.
So what you're saying is they may have already identified the graviton interaction. It's just
Maybe.
nothing to compare to.
It's unlikely because the graviton, I don't think that the theory predicts that there's any realistic chance of it being created at the low energies that we have.
Yeah, too
Each
small.
of these each of these interactions has an interaction energy, and when you go below that energy, your chances of creating that particle as a real particle goes down and down exponentially. So even though it's never a zero chance, it's effectively a zero chance. And I think
So
for graviton, the theoretical models currently predict or require accelerators that are tens of orders of magnitude more powerful than
yeah,
we have.
that's what I was just gonna say. It's literally a technology issue then, and we don't even know what scope of
Yes.
technology we need.
Yes, so to speak. Yeah.
So it could be
And
it could be a million times better than what we have now, more
here's some.
powerful than what we have now, and not be enough.
Yeah, some of these models, depending upon again, these are theoretical models, so it kind of depends which theoretical model you pick. But for things like, yeah, data centers like that are in CERN, and they're the guys that store and then process the data and make it available to other researchers around the globe. So for depending upon the model, I think the current going is that if you wanted the sort of synchrotron type accelerator, so the round ring accelerator type, if you wanted to build one, a sufficient energy to produce some of the quantum gravitation theories, the go-in theory is currently either that the accelerator would have to be solar system sized. Some of them go in as far as being galaxy sized, because
Okay.
that's the amount of energy you'd have to basically pump into the system. And those extremely high energies, it's really difficult to make the particles bend. They basically acquire, so to speak, it's sometimes called relativistic mass. So you basically have to have an accelerator of extremely large size to be able to bend them into a ring.
Okay. So this is what I've decided. You know that theory of everything?
Uh-huh.
What it's going to take is this: us as humans to not only understand and master space travel, but we're going to have to use some extremely far off galaxy and make it our bitch.
Sure. Why
And
don't we just, at that point, we might as well use black holes for energy.
well, no, so you understand, we have already done that.
Okay, there you go.
I find that that's
Yeah,
going to probably be more possible than
maybe. I mean,
than
that would be sort of the direct experimental test. There are indirect tests we can do which might be available at lower energies.
I don't care, man. I want my thousandth removed grandchild to watch the news report about fucking Galaxy 7 CERN.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's hope. Um, yeah. The yeah. I mean, there are many of those theories that are predicting, certain quantum gravitation effects make, well, the hope is to create a theory or develop the theory to such a level to where it makes predictions at lower energy levels that will let us test its validity, without having to, burn up a sun for energy to drive an accelerator. So if it
Are
predicts, for example, many of the unification theories predict things like supersymmetrical particles, which are available at energies much lower than that. Most supersymmetrical theories, in fact, predict that you would be able to detect some part of their aspects about those theories at energies that are just a little bit above the LHC, or within like multiples of the LHC energy. Some of them,
doable,
in fact,
basically.
already inside of the LHC's energy band.
Uh, I have a question. I you hear a lot of the conspiracy blah 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 about CERN and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Are the any of these experiments, tests, observation? Is there a chance? And I don't know how to. Is there a chance a Big Bang could happen? Like,
No,
do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's like some type of interaction that we haven't seen that could.
I know what you mean. No, unlikely. And unlikely in a manner of like essentially impossible. We know that much higher energy interactions that we are able to do in our accelerators already take place in the Earth's atmosphere just from cosmic particles. So when we measure, so typically, the way we measure particle energy is in a unit called an electron volt.
Mhm.
So hundreds, thousands, billions of electron volts, that kind of stuff. And so the LHC tops out at about, the order of 10 tera electron volts. It's quite a lot. That's, what is that, 10 to the power of 12 electron volts. It's actually 10 to the power of 13.
Well, they're sending that
But
shit around at close to the speed of light, aren't they?
yes, I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, you're basically talking about, fractions of a percent close to the speed of light. But even though you can't go much faster, the thing that happens is that as you sort of mount the decimal points at the end of the 99.99 whatever, percentage of the speed of light, your energy goes up much faster. So you can't never get to the speed of light, but the sort of the notion of speed at that point really kind of becomes pointless because it's all
Yeah.
effectively almost speed of light.
Yeah.
Um, the
Indistinguishable between the two.
Yes. And so when it comes to energy of interaction, we have detected in the upper atmosphere just from cosmic ray interactions, those are things that bombard the Earth day in, day out, just from distant supernova explosions. And it's stuff flying through the universe all the time. We have detected interactions that are on the order of 100 tera electron volts or more. They're not rare. They happen every day on the Earth, all the time.
Okay. So
They just
okay,
happen
so
in the upper atmosphere. But
yeah,
point being, yeah, much more energetic reactions have already been taking place for eons in the universe, and no second Big Bang has been produced. So therefore, we know it's not going to happen.
okay, so we would be talking our uh, our galaxy CERN for that to be a situation. No, because even galaxy CERN would be dealing with the same things.
For that, I don't really know the energy levels. At that point, there might actually be a concern. But
Okay.
Galaxy CERN, if we ever have to get to that point, and we still don't have a grand unified theory of everything, I'm gonna be pissed.
Yeah, for real, right?
Because that is like,
Galaxy.
oof,
Yeah.
talk about nature blue balling us. Imagine, we've discovered the standard model here, and for the next 10,000 years, we're not able to make any progress on it. I mean, talk about a cock block.
God comes down and goes, "Gotcha."
Yeah, Imagine all of humanity being edged for the next 10,000 years with prospects of tantalizing physics discoveries and never anything materializing out of it. I mean,
And
it's
they
the
say
ultimate nature friend zone.
and they say science is at a bottleneck right now.
Yep. I mean, the amount of burst physicists that would happen after that, yeah. But anyway, and point being is it's unlikely to, ever be a concern for us.
Yeah.
But obviously, people are going to look into it. We've already had that concern for when the first nuclear bombs were being developed. We're like, are we going to actually incinerate the atmosphere?
What is it? The other day I was listening to someone talk about that. It was like a real channel, like not a so weird channel. It was PhD level people talking about this, and
Yes.
they were talking about when it comes to like the whole atomic part of it and all that stuff, that like the amount of destruction that we have is insignificant to what they know they can do.
Well, for nuclear weapons?
Yeah, like the amount that they use, test, or know can do, they're having to like basically water down the understanding of it to not go overboard. Because like as far as I know,
I'm not sure what you mean refer to.
it wouldn't take much to make one that destroys everything.
Well, it wouldn't take much. It's still highly impractical to make nuclear weapons. And although there are designs that are essentially, we say, infinitely scalable, practically there is a cost to each weapon being built. And, if you're going to be building a weapon that has just self-destructive potential for you as a military, what's the point? What's the point of building a doomsday device if you're going to get killed by it?
You want me to build what?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, if this thing goes off, we lose too. You do realize that.
Yeah.
And
There's no
that kind of,
hiding.
yeah, that's kind of taints the prospects of using that weapon. So at that point, and plus it's going to cost like, $ all money. So what's the point of building that stupid thing?
But that's like say, but that's the same thing you could say for nuclear weapons, at all.
In a sense, well, sort of and not quite. Nuclear weapons are not as destructive as many people think. They are dangerous for sure, and they are very destructive, but they're not, world-endingly destructive.
Well, the volume of which would be shot off. Like if Russia said fuck it, they're not sending one or two.
Definitely, yeah, sure, and yeah, absolutely, it would fuck most of society and probably themselves as well. So I guess
Yeah,
for a fraction of the price, they've already achieved the doomsday scenario, or basically the MAD, the mutually assured destruction. But it's, at that point, what will you have achieved? Will you have achieved? You can even, to be honest, having a nuclear arsenal this large is largely pointless for
it's
both the
supposed to be
United States and Russia.
yeah, it's like it's supposed to be a flex, but
It
it
is,
really is
yeah,
a pointless flex.
it is. So once you go much beyond a few hundred nukes, I mean, there is some sense. I wouldn't say value, but there is some sense in having a few hundred, maybe a few thousand. Well, maybe up to 1,000 nukes. Because if you're talking about, you want to have enough of a deterrent available such that even if part of your arsenal got this, or even if the majority of your arsenal got destroyed in some sort of a first strike, you still have enough to strike back and cause enough damage to the adversary such that they will never be motivated to attack you in the first place. So, for instance, a Trident II submarine-launched ballistic missile on the U.S. Ohio class, each of them has a capability of up to 10 independently targetable reentry vehicles. So yes, so each of the Ohio class has 24 missiles on board. So it's already 240 nuclear warheads that you could have on board. Now you could cut down the number of warheads on boards to less. You could say, like, let's say we don't put 10 on each of them, the maximum load. Let's go with 3 or 4. But you're still talking at that point something on the order of 100 warheads per nuclear submarine. And so
Yeah.
if you're going to have, let's say, 10 submarines, that's already 1,000 warheads in your arsenal. And then,
What's
so
this?
even if the adversary managed to destroy like 8 or 9 of your submarines, a single lone submarine that did survive is still able to wreak so much havoc on the enemy.
What the scary, disgusting part about what you just said is that one, detecting a submarine, not an easy task.
Yes, it's
Two,
kind of their job.
yeah, and here's the scary part, motherfuckers, everyone listening, because I know you know this. China, Russia, all those fuckers we don't like, they sit right off our coast with submarines like that. And when I say off our
Well,
coast, I don't mean a couple hundred miles. I'm talking those motherfuckers visit harbors and I don't know. I'm not gonna say they go into
not
harbors,
not
but
quite so
they
close.
they
They
get they get they get too close. That's the best way of
I mean,
saying it.
they get to within maybe hundreds of miles, more typically
Mm,
thousands of miles. You
I
don't
would
want
say
to have
closer.
your ballistic. You don't want to have no, no. You don't want to have your. So the U.S. has a large system of sonar listening sonar listening, outposts on the seafloor. So you don't want to get too close. You want to basically keep nice and deep water away
Mm,
from everybody, such that you would be able to receive an order if necessary. To if they say go, you go,
oh,
but you also want to be close enough to an adversary to where you're going to be able to hit them within a reasonable time
well,
span. And to be honest, 1,000 miles is plenty close enough for that. You're going to be able to hit,
well,
like, if you park a submarine with SLBMs 1,000 miles away from the U.S. shore, you're going to have nukes raining on U.S. cities within about 15 minutes.
okay. So even spy reconnaissance,
What
they wouldn't
spy satellites?
ever.
Yeah.
No. I'm talking about like subs because they do bring subs close, but those are not the ones that have nukes and all that kind of stuff on them.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Your ballistic subs you want to keep far away from the adversary as possible, and that's sort of a cat and mouse game for the U.S. Navy. Is they want to do the opposite. Is they want to keep a track of every single adversary's ballistic missile at a ballistic sub at any given
Artillery. Yeah.
time. So they play these little cat and mouse games where you're going to have let's say a Soviet or now a Russian ballistic missile sub out on sea, and the U.S. is going to employ quite a bit of resources to try and track where it went, and then dispatch an attack submarine to shadow the thing, so such that if Putin ever got a little bit trigger happy on the big red button,
uh,
you could just give the order, and torpedoes are going to be in the water within minutes, and that submarine is going to go down to the bottom before it ever gets any shots off from its ballistic payload.
so I guess that would be and that would be more of a situation of we detected something here, we detected something over here. They could be over here because they're not actually seeing them. Like, well, in some situations, I
Although
guess you would
they're
be
able to
seeing them.
shadow them, they are able to shadow them. So
Okay,
your submarines, your attack submarines, are doing drills about this all the time, where they're out in the ocean patrolling the seas, and if they detect something that could be a ballistic sub, they might have received tasking, over on the intercom or on the data link coming in from submarine command center going, there's expected to be a Bore class, ballistic missile sub operating in the
okay,
area. You are tasked with locating it and following it and recording, get like acoustic profiles for it, get its maneuvering capability, make sure it's not straying too close to our territory, and they like try and shadow the thing without themselves being detected. And of course,
back and
many
forth.
ballistic subs, yeah, and it's the same thing. The Russians are going to do the same thing to the U.S. Ohio class ballistic
Mhm.
subs, and it's all sort of each quietly and covertly, but holding a knife to each other's back, so to speak.
Yeah, because essentially they're in no man's land. They're in international waters. So it
Yes,
literally is do what you
it's a
want,
free for
but
all,
yeah. So
so to speak. I
just
mean, there
don't
are
shoot, don't
maritime.
shoot.
Exactly. I mean, there are rules of the sea and navigation. You don't want to get into each other's way, but at the same time, don't fucking start an international incident for fuck's sake. Jesus Christ,
Yeah,
man, be
yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah, don't put your nose in our territory thinking you're safe. Like one of those
That,
types of
or like
situations.
don't provoke a response. Like if you there are ways that submarines could get spooked or cause a preemptive, like either a launch or like a response from like with a torpedo, where they might think that, oh shit, we're about to be attacked or whatever. You don't want to do that. There's
Mm.
some rules of engagement there, where they're going to say something like, don't close to within 10,000 yards of the Russian ballistic sub or stuff like that.
Oh, okay, yeah. That applies into the
Such that
rules.
they don't feel threatened, because if you get very close, they're gonna get a little bit fritzy and a little bit jumpy on the buttons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
And
you
these are
will
just the
if
sub
you're
parts of it.
yes. I mean, if you're a Russian submariner, your worst nightmare is having finding an American attack sub within 30 seconds of your butt, with the torpedo tubes ready to go. That'd be a little bit disconcerting.
But would you even know?
Well, that's kind of the idea, right? Is stay the fuck far away and don't let them know you're there.
Yeah.
And they play these cat and mouse games. That's all stupid. They've been playing these games for a half century now.
I wonder. I wonder if they're like submarine battles that we don't know about.
No, unlikely. That would have been an international incident. All these submarines are accounted for,
Okay,
unless you're
yeah.
talking about. I guess you might say there,
Hmm.
conspiracies where a submarine, sank for any particular navy, and you might say that, oh no, that was an incident of an unintentional enemy engagement, and both sides agree that they're gonna go hush hush and say that no, it was just an
Yeah.
accident or something.
Well, I do
Unlikely.
know. I know for a fact. This is hmm, this is not conspiracy, but it is not the concern of the military. Anyway, I do know that there is a heightened concern with submarine attacks from like Cuba, South America. Not so much even attacks, drug smugglers, shit like that. That I
Oh,
know they have to
that's
interact
another
with,
story.
and I know those turn into things, but
Now, those are
I
not
don't
really
think it's.
submarines in the same class. Not
Oh
anywhere
hell
near.
no, no. But they are having to contend with them because like I know
Yes.
overseas the Navy has had to deal with a lot of we'll say non real military sub
And
attacks.
non-state actors is typically
Yeah,
what it's called.
yeah, okay. So I
Oh, you
mean
talking
there
about
are
piracy?
yeah. Well, that there's all kind of intertwined with each other in some sense of
Yeah.
defense.
So for drug smuggling, there have been cases in the U.S. where Colombian gangs and that kind of stuff. They're actually fairly well financed, so they've built themselves some tiny little submarines for smuggling drugs, that kind of stuff over the border, or through international waters. And there the U.S. actually has a bunch of sensor nets deployed in the Gulf of Mexico to try and detect those. They're not particularly well built or stealthy, so they're not really that difficult to find. But at the same time, it is a low cost, you know, low cost method for the drugs to get drugs in. So therefore, the U.S. has to expend a bunch of money to detect them.
But if you think about it, those are some pretty badass subs though.
Uh,
they're not
just
nuclear class or nothing close to it, but
no.
some of them are pretty
I mean,
badass.
many subs are not nuclear. Um, the U.S. is the only one that operates a purely nuclear submarine force. Everybody else has a mix. Some of
Uh,
them only have diesel electric.
do they
Germans have
this
submarines,
this is going to sound weird,
I
but
think.
it maybe not to you. Do they have stealth submarines?
All submarines are designed to be stealth.
Okay, so they don't. Okay, but you know what I'm talking about. I think we talked about tanks and shit like that with the stealth
Oh, you mean
armor and all that.
there's all submarines are designed around being stealthy. It's just
Yeah.
underwater, there's no such thing as visible light
Well,
stealth, because you can't see very far. You can see a few meters.
well, I mean, could you put a skin? Well, I guess they probably already do have a skin that absorbs sound or
Yes, they do.
but does
Yep,
that give
absolutely.
does that give a signature or is that because
It is
diffusing
designed.
sound would? I'm sorry.
So all submarines these days have varying levels of stealth technology, of course, and much of it is classified, to
Hmm.
varying levels. So we don't know about the things they have that they've never told us about, but we can theorize about the stuff they've told us or stuff that we've seen. So, for instance, most submarines, most new design submarines these days, the U.S. Virginia class, and some of the British and Australian designs. Well, Australia's actually buying them from, I think, the U.S. now. I'm not sure. Are using rubberized tiles, so they actually have a rubber outer layer on them that is designed to dampen active sonar, such that if there's a active sonar ping coming in, that layer tends to somewhat flexibly recoil and reflect less of that sonar energy back to the initiator.
But wouldn't that? Okay, so it gives
Another
a
thing that,
signature, but it's just a really weak signature
well,
compared to.
yes, I mean, that's the only thing you can hope for, right?
Mhm.
It's like radar, stealth aircraft are not invisible to radar. They just massively reduce the return they give by orders of magnitude less, therefore cutting the detection range. Such that,
Oh, okay.
if a non-stealth if a non-stealth aircraft were visible from 120 miles away, a stealth aircraft might only pop up on the same energy radar from like 20 miles away,
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
which is
So it just
quite the
deflects it
advantage.
just enough that it doesn't come back almost, or doesn't come back in a
It
direct.
it absorbs it. It tries to disperse some of that energy. It tries to avoid creating some oblique angles that concentrate the return energy, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so that would be why a B-52. This is not right, but a B-52 would look like
It,
a flock of duck instead of a
well,
big ass
a
blob.
B-52 will look like a big ass blob because that's not a stealth aircraft. It was not,
I know.
literally that's
I know.
1952.
I
But a
just I was trying to think
B2,
of something
yeah,
big.
yes, a B2 Spirit, that the big flying wing thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That has a radar cross section, yeah, basically like a single duck or something like that. If you
Okay.
compared it to like for like,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but there isn't
and
anything that
yeah,
just
yes,
completely makes you invisible.
yes, there isn't. And the idea is essentially that for a radar, it's going to be unable to distinguish that return from just background noise. So you're going to basically blend into the background noise until it's too late for them to react to you, such that you would have the initial opportunity to strike first, or drop bombs or that kind of stuff, attack first, get the first shot off. That's
Yeah.
sort of the idea.
And now this is gonna sound foolish, but in my brain it seems like something that could be done. Do they ever do they ever play like marine life sounds and shit?
Do they ever play marine
Yeah, so
life sounds?
have you ever seen
I
Periscope?
I know,
Periscope
yeah, down
dive?
Periscope. I know, I know. It's a good movie. I don't think so, because that's generally still considered putting out a signature. So I think they basically just try and
Shut the fuck
blend
up.
into the background. I'm not sure about submarines. I don't really know much. On the other hand, for aircraft, I can tell you that for sure, active electronic jamming or radar is a thing that's used all the
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
in aircraft. And that effectively what it's trying to do is, instead of trying to conceal your signature, it's trying to saturate the target radar with just trash, just trash returns that the radar has a difficult or very, very hard time distinguishing valid targets from just random jumbled up nonsense. So for instance, a radar, typically what it'll do is it'll send out a series of pulses. And then when it receives that series of pulses back, it basically just times the difference between them.
Mhm.
And that's going to give you your distance to the target, and the position at which the antenna was at that time. That gives you the direction and so the position of the target. So with those two, you can paint the target onto a radar scope. So what if the target, instead of just returning a single reply, returned a complete you know it started returning back to you a bunch of pulses that are completely mistimed, such that you either misestimate the distance, or you paint like additional targets all over the map, like 100
It'd be
extra points.
it'd be
At that point,
like making radio transmissions, but then adding 100 scam transmissions, and you don't get to know which one's the
exactly.
right one.
Exactly. That's sort of the idea with the electronic warfare. And it's been going on since the 70s, or pretty much probably even since the 60s. And so these days, the systems are super sophisticated on both sides, both the electronic the electronic countermeasures ECM and the EECM. I'm sorry, ECCM. So the electronic countermeasures, where the radars themselves are actually trying to actively counter the electronic countermeasures of the target they're trying to paint.
Damn.
Yes.
God,
So
that makes war so difficult.
it is sort of an invisible battle of gun versus armor going on, except it's in the electronic space of radar trying to detect, and the passive and active electronic countermeasures are trying to counteract the radar and trying to defeat it.
All this talk pisses me off that we didn't kick Afghanistan's ass. We have all this
Well,
shit,
you
and
you
cavemen
kind of
basically couldn't do anything.
well, that's the thing is, I heard it nicely described once. The U.S. military is great at kicking ass, but they're terrible at managing the aftermath.
Yeah,
And the reason why the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, and you might say lost, but sort of depends on how you quantify this. It's not because the U.S. didn't kick Afghanistan's butt. You kick the Taliban's butt within a few weeks, no problem. The problem was then trying to change the culture of the land, which
yeah,
is much harder to do than you can't force a whole nation to change its culture.
yeah. That was probably the biggest f up. Well,
It was
one of
fundamentally
their.
flawed, or yeah, it was doomed to failure from the start.
I kind of look at it like martial arts. Like there's a lot work, but like karate is a good example. I've always felt like
Mhm.
karate only works when you're going to get someone in karate. And it kind of holds to our military technology and the means at which we battle. Our technology is so advanced that we're not fit to fight the most basic army.
I mean, no, it's the problem was that Afghanistan, where you're talking about the insurgency, that's not actually an army. That's the problem. It's
Oh, this is too
fighting
scattered
and
randoms.
yeah, you're fundamentally at that point you're not really fighting an army. You're fighting like the population. Well, a decent chunk of it anyway. And how do you distinguish them from
Oh
just
yeah,
civilians?
yeah, yeah.
You
There's no
can't go
rules of
scorched
engagement the
earth.
same.
Yeah, yeah, you can't go scorched earth and just go ahead and um, you know, horrible to say, but you can't just go and genocide the entire population, because that would for sure end the insurgency, but it will also end the population, which is not what you want.
I mean, it has worked in the past. I mean, I don't really want to talk.
It
It's kind of
it's
fucking
it
rude,
has
but
it has worked in the non-civilized past, the Middle Ages, where this
no,
was
no.
actually done,
Even
and that was
current
horrible.
times.
We
I
don't
mean,
want to, we don't want to go back to those days. And
I'll just say
World War
this.
II was the last. Yeah, World War II
Yeah,
was the last one where it was actually attempted at a large scale, and everybody hated it. So
but
let's
it
not.
worked. But it did work. Those motherfuckers, they
It
stopped real quick. They stopped fucking with people. Japan even said, "Hey, we will no longer. Our military will never go on the. Will never be the aggressor."
no 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 no. That's when you're no. That's actually a nation state to nation state war. That has worked before and it's worked since. It's not the thing. When you're talking about genocide, I'm talking about literally exterminating
Oh,
every
okay.
person.
Oh, yeah, no, no,
And
no, no, no,
that
no.
has
That's not what I
happened
meant.
in the Middle Ages.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Places like when the
Genghis
Mongols took
Khan was shit.
Baghdad.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they took Baghdad, they literally slaughtered every man, woman, and child in Baghdad because they didn't surrender. And it's like, let's not do that again.
No, no, I don't want to do that. I don't think we could. I no. I'll say this. I don't think. First of all, I don't think any other country could do it. But America can't do that because then they would just be genociding their own people. That makes sense. Like we're too much of a melting pot for that to ever be a rational course of action.
I
like
suppose, yeah,
like
you could do it that way. Yeah.
who would you genocide and not be genociding the people that live in your country?
Well, the entire idea is that don't do it in your country, but nevertheless, it's more like America is still, mostly a democracy, and whoever tried to implement that would. Okay, I don't even want to think about what the nation would have to come to for that to be okay with the population.
It would literally take a country to start launching nukes everywhere for the rest of the country to go, yeah, it's time.
No, I mean, like, it would have to politically change in such a manner to where I don't think America would be the shining city on a hill anymore. You're
Oh, I
talking
don't
like
think. Yeah, no, no.
you're talking having a massage the general populace with horrible ideology for decades, and then it's you would call that fascist America at that point, I think, and
Yeah,
not what we want.
no, I don't think that'll ever be an option. I don't think there. I don't think
Let's
there's a
hope that's
country
never going to
where
happen.
enough. It would take like a country and all the people to declare genocide on everyone for us to think that would be acceptable. And then
Yeah,
they would have to be starting to do it, and it would have to be
that
everyone of that population.
that's the thing. Well, that's the thing. Sort of, you think like that couldn't happen, but it's happened in 1930s Germany, and that's
Yeah,
because it wasn't like Germany had just turned into that. That was already there was a massive undercurrent of racism and ethnic hatred that was already there for hundreds of years. It was just Hitler didn't create it. He was just tapping into it and amplifying it. And
using it for his
since then,
advantage.
yes, and since we've seen the horrible effectiveness of mechanized, extermination at that scale, everybody's kind of lost their appetite for, okay, this is something where humanity never should venture into again, hopefully. And so these days we try, hopefully we've grown out of that reflex. Let's hope.
I kind of feel like if countries in the Middle East had a choice.
Yes, some of those countries have not gone quite through that same sort of rational or moral awakening, I would say. Yes, some of them would absolutely do it if they had a chance. And some of them would not even feel bad about it.
Not even a little bit.
Yep.
That's
So
crazy.
let's hopefully, some stabilizing effects, even though the United Nations is a bit of a meme, but it is still a method for countries to try and resolve their conflicts in a manner that does not end in total destruction and annihilation. Hopefully.
Hopefully. And with that, I think we're going to end it. I got some things I got to take care of today. But
Yeah,
man,
it kind of got heavy at the end there, didn't it?
yeah. But it was a good combo though. I like that. I like picking your brain when it comes to those different things because you know a lot about them. It's
I know bits and
absolutely
pieces.
interesting. Well, they're good bits and pieces. They're bits and
I'm
pieces that
glad I
help
could
me
be of help.
understand it better. Because I honestly was like, could genocide be okay? But
Yeah, let's not. Let's learn from history and try and not repeat the mistakes again.
exactly. But what was I going to say? Um, Yesterday I played the interaction with you and Mr. Slave. I absolutely enjoyed that conversation you guys had. Uh,
Oh
it
yeah, it's too bad he left the server. I was hoping to,
oh,
rip
did he
his
really?
model apart a little bit more.
I can make that
Yes,
happen.
he did.
I'll hit him up.
Uh,
You know you
if he
want to.
wants to rejoin and talk again, it's gonna be fun because I've found some more problems in it. But whatever.
I'll see if I can get him to do it here if he won't go there. That's what I'm
Sure,
trying.
I guess.
I'm trying to establish a safe place for debates.
Cool.
um, yeah, you want to end it with 30 seconds or something? I think
Well,
usually I
everybody,
just
everybody subscribe to Sean G and give him your likes and your subscribe memberships, and see you later, folks.
absolutely. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Alrighty, people. It was a fun one. I actually enjoyed that conversation actually a lot. It's fun to talk about the off stuff besides just fucking stupid flat Earth. But yeah, I don't want to say that because I don't want the debate with Brian Leakey. I'm so stupid. The debate with Brian Leakey. I'm trying to get that going. Hopefully this Saturday it will happen. Trying to get the other side to agree to the time, or the time is easy. The day is the hard part. So we'll see if that's going to happen, and I will post that as soon as I can. Other than that, I don't think I had anything to promote. I've been kind of like laying back a lot this week. Like I said last week, I stretched myself thin, and I definitely felt it. So I have been laying low this week. That's why there wasn't a lot planned for today or nothing. But things will be picking up because I got some things I'm trying to get going, and they look promising. Another aspect of this that I think I talked about earlier was the members thing. I'm going to do this. I actually thought about this just recently. I'm going to make it stupid cheap to get to kind of see how you guys enjoy it. If you guys like it, then it may go up a little bit, but then I'll add some better stuff. But I kind of want to feel her out. I don't really know how I feel about the whole members thing. It's kind of weird. I don't really like it, but I do want to show some of this footage, and I'm conflicted. So we'll see how that goes. I'll probably start asking some people what I should do that I trust when it comes to these type of things. But no matter what, there will be a place to see all the fucking chaos that I have ensued over the past 10 years of my recordings. So that will be coming soon. I am going to shut myself up and stop myself from this endless rant that I always do. So thank you guys for being here. I absolutely enjoyed it. Hope you guys did too. And I will see you guys on Friday. Peace.
If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong.
Yeah, look, they said that I couldn't do it, so I went and did it. W's only, you know I've been winning. Top of the world, the globe is spinning. If you know, I've been on a mission. Go. Okay, let's get it. Got a little time on my hands like a wristwatch. I don't got time for the brakes and the pit stop. Race through the gridlock, take it like Chris Rock. Right to the chin, still win. Heavy metals like Slipknot. Got the driving, I got tunnel vision. I just hit my stride the way I run the business. I've been making paper like I'm Dunder Mifflin. See the end game, I got one division. Look, I don't ever bother with a critic. Hit him with a chronicle of Riddick. Boom, bottle full of Ritalin. I hit him with a little bit of riddle me this, riddle me that. My bad, fell asleep at the gas. No time to wait though. Elon Musk, I'm trying to bankroll. New Tesla just cause I say so. Electric whip like Ivan Van Gogh. I just did it. W's only, you know I've been winning. Top of the world, the globe is spinning. If you know, I've been on a mission. Okay, let's get it.
I've been on a mission like totally spice. I'm bad, she bad, but she totally nice. Nails are blue and her toes feel like white. They completely match out at the soul for my leg. You knew it for sure.